Welcome to the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett and Robbie Woodard,
where we cover our journey, struggles, and obstacles that we have overcome, and moments in our careers that have led to growth. Here on Table Talk each week, where we break down various topics and journals of our trials and tribulations.
Welcome to the Leadership Journal podcast with your hosts, Nick Helgett, Robbie Woodard, and Jed Stoltz. This is our season finale. We're here to kind of recap what we've gone over for season one. Very excited that after the first couple episodes, we got Jed involved, and now he's become a regular on the show. Very excited about him being here. But just kind of recap. So we've gone through leadership engagement, the three worlds idea, which I know you weren't a part of that, Jed, but just kind of recap of the three worlds. And I think this is a pretty important thing to kind of key in on as people are looking to develop and move into leadership positions, or if you're in a leadership position that you're trying to manage through that time where you've got your executive world, your personal world that's kind of in the middle, and then your team, right? And you have to balance those three worlds. And something that I'm working on right now, and my current supervisor has told me that I need to do better with. He's blocked out my lunchtime now.
Wait, he actually put on your calendar you have a lunch period.
He makes me come to his office.
Oh, he makes you go to your... Okay.
So that I'll actually sit down and eat lunch. Otherwise, I won't.
So, but you promised to me on the episode that you would take your lunch break at about 8 in the morning, and you failed to do that.
Oh, I did. I've failed miserably.
Okay.
Because
you eat lunch at 8 in the morning?
No. More like between 10 and noon. I try to eat it. I try to eat because I get there early. So, So yeah, it is important to balance those times, and I'm seeing more and more as you allow yourself to not give yourself a little bit of time, and you allow yourself to get sucked into all the things that are going on operationally throughout the day. You know, you get to 2 hours before you're going to go home and you realize you haven't eaten lunch. That's really not a good, healthy way to balance your day. So, I mean, lunch seems like such a trivial thing, but it's important to take that time for yourself to recharge for your, midday.
I mean, it's such an easy thing to kind of say, oh, it can wait. But like we had talked about, sacrificing your own time says that your time is not as important and that it can wait. And for a lot of leaders, that is a go-to response of I can wait. I can do something else. But then you get lost in the executive world, you get lost in the real world, and then before you know it, you've gone 16 hours not taking a single moment for yourself, and that lights the fuse on both ends, burns a candle, and then now you're done.
But if we talk about the different leadership styles again, like we've discussed in previous episodes, that idea of servant leadership is that you're there for your team at all times. You tend to sacrifice anything for yourself to make sure that you're there for your team.
It's also important to remember, though, that you can't fill up the cups of others if yours isn't also full.
Correct.
And so, like Robbie was saying, you have to take care of yourself if you're going to take care of others.
Yep.
You have to keep your strength up, keep yourself grounded, and take care of yourself so that you're available and capable emotionally and physically of helping take care of others.
Since you weren't a part of this episode, Jed, how do you filter information that you get from your senior leadership down to your team? Because you can't just walk into a meeting with your team and say, well, I just heard XYZ things, and here's all the raw data, right, that you just absorbed. So how do you filter that and make it palatable for your team?
I mean, it really depends, I suppose, on the nature of what it is I'm trying to tell them. If we're talking like process change, for example, right? Somebody we went in a meeting, someone's looking at some data and they're saying, hey, what we're doing is not working. We need to change direction and start doing this instead. And I know it's something that's going to be unpopular with my team. I try really hard to connect it to a why and help make it clear why we're doing it and not just why it's good for the company, but why it can benefit them. And also make it clear that, we're open to feedback. Like tell us what's working, tell us what's not, because just because we have this idea as a leadership team doesn't mean it's the right idea. And if it's not working, tell us and we'll make changes. Like we need to work together on it. But I think the big thing is connecting with the why. This is why we're doing it. This is why it helps you guys. This is why it's good for the business. I try not to pass it on as just something that my boss has told me, right? I mean, there's a time and a place, I suppose, but I'm also a firm believer, that if as a leader you're just telling other people what you were told, then you're not leading, you're a mouthpiece. And again, there's a time and a place for that kind of thing, but I also am a firm believer that that as leadership, it's important that we're at least reasonably united, right? And so if my boss tells me, hey, we're going to make this change of direction, I'm going to go to my team and say, as a company, we're making this change of direction. I'm not going to say, well, my boss told me that we're making this change of direction, and now I'm telling you guys, right? I don't like to do that if I can avoid it. I think those are the big things. I try to connect them to the why, and I try not to just say, well, the bosses are making us do this, and because I don't think that's the right approach.
I often circle back to an example that Jocko gave of like having a plan that you're trying to implement that might not be favorable with your workforce, right? And his example was, hey, I pushed back to the boss, I brought up your concerns, yada yada, but at the end of the day, he shut it down and he wants it done this way. So what we're going to do, we're going to execute exactly this way, and we're going to build that capital so that next time we have another concern, he's going to see, okay, they followed my direction last time, so let's hear them out this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, again, depending, I guess, on the setting, or the idea, I think I like to have those kinds of conversations in smaller groups, a little more private, a little more intimate setting, rather than, say we're having a tailgate and I've got 40 people in the room and I'm presenting this new idea or this change, rather than saying in that setting, hey, here's what so-and-so says we're going to do. And, I know you guys hate it, and I told him you're going to hate it. And he said, well, it's what we have to do anyway, so we're going to do it. Right. It's about how you craft the message and when is the appropriate time. And I think, soliciting feedback as a group and taking that feedback and then running that up the chain, and then circling back later with those individuals who gave you that feedback and saying, hey guys, here's what I learned from providing that feedback, and here's kind of where we're going based on that. And if it needs to be another big group meeting, like, hey, you know what, I got some great feedback, I ran that up the chain, and they decided, my leadership said, that's a great idea, let's make some changes. So I know I just said we're going that direction, but we're going to adjust and we're going to go this direction instead because you guys nailed it. You killed it. Then, I want to do that in front of everybody. But if it's like, no, you guys don't know what you're talking about, you need to just keep doing what I told you to do, I'd rather have that conversation individually or in small groups.
And the thing that I think always comes about when there's this new message coming from up top, they have no idea what they're talking about, what they want us to do. They don't do this for a living. But leaders, even though we aren't physically connected to the environment, we're not physically doing the job, we interact, we watch, we observe, we have a different perspective. So there's some value in what we're trying to do to help push something. Maybe what we see is pulling everyone's perspective together from A, B, C, and D, saying, okay, now let's put this together and let's try it a different way, rather than just doing what we're constantly doing and we want to see change, but we don't know how to get there. This is how we get there. And like you had said, the why is important. Like I had said, there's always that the guy up top who sits in the cubicle has got this new direction. Well, maybe he actually does know what he's trying to pursue. He just needs us to put that together to get to that value out of it and see if that will help with some change.
And a big part for me of connecting the why, you made the point of not just throwing raw data at them and saying, hey, here's all this information. Like, how do you connect? How do you shape that for them? To be honest, a big part of that for me is showing them the data. That's partly how I connect them to the why, right? And it's not that necessarily we'll show them every single thing that we looked at, because maybe not every single thing we looked at in this meeting is relevant to the conversation we're having. But the big hitters, I'll absolutely. I mean, I have no qualms about sitting down as a group, firing up the projector and saying, hey, let's look at a couple graphs and let's talk about what these graphs mean. This is why we've already having this conversation. This came up. This is who's looking at it, and we're looking at it, and it kind of looks like this to us. And so we're thinking we need to make a change of direction. And I'm here to tell you guys this is what we're thinking. And if you see something different in this data, because you guys do the job every day, tell me. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I get really good ideas. People say, well, I see this trend, and I can see why someone would think it's that. But have you considered it might be this instead, contributing to that? I never thought I don't know if anyone did think about it. Let me see if anyone thought about that. Let's bring that into the equation. See if that's a factor.
Mm-hmm. That part is super important, because if you're say a high level headquarters person and you're looking at raw data that shows a trend that is in a downward progression, right? So we're not producing as much as we were. They don't know that Bobby was sick yesterday and Sheila over here, had an injury, and they don't know the whys. So oftentimes hourly workers that are producing, they're focused on that and they don't see the bigger picture. So being able to connect those dots is vitally important to understand, okay, this is why we got to push a little harder for the next week or whatever that time frame looks like.
Well, I think a real life example where that has kind of worked out for me is it was a much smaller setting, but talking about why a machine wouldn't run efficiently that used to be incredibly efficient. And you got all these people putting their heads together, looking at every aspect of it, trying to figure this out. Nobody come up with a smoking gun like this is what's going on. This is why it won't run. And it starts getting to the point where we're just throwing money at the problem. Let's replace this. Let's replace that. Let's bring someone in and look at that. And nothing seems to be helping, at least not for very long. And at some point, right, we, as a collective group, all the salaried staff kind of get the idea like, well, what are the people who run this machine every day saying? I don't know why it took us so long to come up with that, but let's go talk to the people who run this machine every day and see what they say. And so we go talk to the people like, hey, I know you guys aren't here every day that we're troubleshooting this because they don't work the same shift that the salaried folks do, but this is all the things we've gone through. We just cannot figure it out. What are you guys seeing? And literally had someone tell us, it's never been this cold in the building before. That's it. And all of a sudden, clicked in everyone's brain. You're right. It's usually a lot warmer in here. And come to find out, sure enough, that the ambient temperature of the building will impact the efficiency of this machine's runnability. It will absolutely do it.
Yeah, because when you're talking about different chemicals or glues or whatever, they react differently depending on what the temperature is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, someone goes around and finds out that all the makeup air units aren't turned on. We found out that they shut themselves out automatically for certain reasons, and that's a good thing. It's a safety thing, but that when they do that, we need to be aware, and we have to manually turn them back on. They won't come back on automatically. And we got them fired up. It warmed up within an hour or two inside the building, and all of a sudden the machine took off. It's right back where it used to be, running like crazy, running great. And for weeks, we're looking in all the wrong areas because nobody bothered to ask the people who run the machine every day, what's different now than 5 years ago? Well, 5 years ago, it wasn't 50 degrees in the building. It was 75 degrees in the building.
I mean, when you compare like retail to manufacturing to a bunch of other different environments to distribution, when you have people involved, people can adapt, people can make things work, and they're impacted a lot less than a super sensitive machine like pneumatics, oils, liquid fluids. They'll have different aspects at which the normal person isn't going to consider that because the machine doesn't tell us, hey, I'm too cold. It's just going to not work. It's not going to function. Right. It's hypersensitive and just says, okay, I'm not going to function today.
And that goes right back to putting employees first,
mm-hmm.
consider their opinions, consider the environment that they're working in, and taking care of them, because they're going to be the ones that tell you, hey, XYZ reasons, we can do better because of this. And so at the end of the day, you take care of your employees, you make them feel valued, and you act on their input, they're going to take care of your customer.
Yep.
So then we also covered bad teams and bad leaders. That was another kind of, to give the credit where credit is due for other authors, the idea of there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. So taking care of your employees, employing the right leadership strategies, employing those that feedback that you're getting from your teams, you're going to be much more successful as a team. And then having emotional intelligence, not taking it personal when your team tells you no, you're wrong, and here's why, and being able to not just take complaining and be able to take that specific data that they're giving you and implementing it. And then also controlling that narrative, not letting it just be I know we don't use a lot of cuss words on this, but a bitch fest, but kind of diving back into that, Robbie, what do you think about emotional intelligence?
Well, I mean, like when we take emotional intelligence and we look back at leader engagement, like an emotionally intelligent leader has the empathy, or they have the awareness, they have the listening, they have the ability to dissect situations, and rather than just jumping from one thing to another and just putting out fires, they look at ways to interact and involve their team so that there's the engagement and there's the buy-in from your people. Because just because you're a leader doesn't mean your team has to listen to you. And when we go back to when we talked about leader engagement, there can be those leaders that are not engaged, those leaders that don't have the buy-in, they don't have they have the authority because they're in that position, but they don't have the want from their team, and they're not
going to listen to you if you don't engage and you don't build relationships and have respect for your team.
No,
they're not going to listen to you.
No, and being able to have the emotional intelligence to say, I'm not always right, I don't always have the correct answer, I may know some things, but that person on my team has 100% more knowledge in this aspect than I am. You're going to lean on that person. You're going to interact with them a lot more, and you're going to pull them in. They're going to become more engaged. They're going to become more of the team with you, and maybe they're that person that helps you get more buy-in from everybody else, because now that they see you engaging with that person, you'll interact with the next person, and so on and so forth, and you'll build that.
One another, we talked a lot about emotional intelligence in that episode, being aware of your own emotions and how they affect you, but an equally valid part of emotional intelligence is understanding the emotions other people are feeling, right? And you were talking, Nick, about it, not about controlling the narrative and not letting it just become a complaining session. And, you're absolutely right. But I think one of the ways that we miss as leaders in changing what may be on the surface just a complaining session into a meaningful discussion, an actionable discussion, is where we don't read between the lines. When you don't have the emotional intelligence, maybe just at the moment, because you got stuff going on in your own world, and you're trying, your head's somewhere else right now, and this person maybe complains regularly, and just let them complain until they stop, and then they'll get it out and go about their day. And what you're not doing is you're not seeing what's actually wrong. You're hearing the words they're saying, you're seeing the surface information, you're taking it at face value, but you're not seeing what actually is the problem, and you can't address it, and it doesn't go away, and it sits there and festers, and they get more and more disgruntled, and they complain more and more, because you're hearing what they're saying, you're hearing the words, but you're not actually listening and understanding what it is they're trying to convey, what's actually happening.
You're listening to respond rather than listening to understand. And there's a key phrase to that we covered a lot, active listening, which is an important part of being emotionally intelligent or being engaged or being connected with your team, is having that skill set enough to listen, hear the problem that maybe they're not directly saying, but they're talking about a bunch of things that are interconnected on the surface level. Okay, maybe it just sounds like they're complaining, but they might have a lot of value in here that maybe they can't voice because it's all big to them. How do you condense it?
Well, and I've got a real world example. Sorry, Nick. I've got a real world example from just this last couple of weeks. With my team, I had 2 technicians who are working together, and one of them is kind of in the lead for the day of running their machine, and he wants to run at a certain speed, which is great, right? He wants to maximize his production. He wants to get it going. It's running really good, and he wants to take advantage of that. And his counterpart on that machine is not interested in doing that. He wants to run at a different rate. And it became a problem between the 2 of them. And, before long, they're upstairs in the office with me and my peer, and we're talking about how, he said he was going to slow the machine down when I went to break, and that's BS, and I don't and that he shouldn't be doing that. I'm the one running the machine today, and at the end of the day, right, what the issue was not the rate at which they wanted to run the machine. The issue was that Tech A didn't feel respected by Tech B to run the machine the way he saw fit when it was his turn.
Yeah.
That was what the issue was.
Yeah.
And we could very easily have said, what, Tech B, just stop. Just shut up. Let him do his thing, okay? You'll have your turn tomorrow. And just left it at that. Would it have solved the problem today? No. Today it would have. He would have shut up, and he would have let him run the machine because we told him to.
No, but that's not command and control.
Right, exactly. I mean, in the moment, yes, that would have solved the problem right now in front of me. But it wouldn't have fixed the problem long term. It would not have helped their relationship, and they have to work together every day. It wouldn't have helped build their relationship. It wouldn't have helped make them a better team who can run that machine better together in the future. It wouldn't have helped any of that.
Yeah.
And again, they were talking about the speed of the machine, but the issue was that Tech B or Tech A doesn't feel heard and respected by Tech B. So we had that conversation instead.
Want to talk about animosity? That's building animosity by just letting that constantly fester and not helping turn that off is the ultimate way to create that separation between 2 great team members.
Yep.
Yeah. Because they're both very capable.
Yeah. There's a time and a place for the command and control culture, but that specific situation that wouldn't have fixed the problem.
No. But I mean, that's a great opportunity where we could have missed entirely what was actually being said and just gone straight to what is the problem directly in front of me on the surface. These guys he's not listening to him. He says he's going to do this. Well, don't do that. Problem solved.
Yeah. And I watched my leader very recently. He came to one of my meetings with my team, and right now in our facility, there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of construction. There's a lot of things happening very quickly that are not favorable for my team, right? And it's a means to an end for a better future, right? But it's hard to see that right now. And I watched a very frustrated team member approach my leader with some concerns, and he wasn't doing it appropriately. And before I could step in and do anything, I watched my leader very eloquently navigate a very difficult conversation very positively. And the entire time I'm watching this unfold, all I could think is, I can learn so much from this individual. I'm not even worried about inappropriateness with what my team member is saying to my boss, but I'm focused on the fact that my leader has the ability, has the capability to navigate that conversation flawlessly without missing a beat and de-escalate a situation that was very tense. And I was super impressed by that. And I reflected on that for a day at least, if not longer. I'm still thinking about it. So having those skills to be able to navigate those difficult conversations is so important as a leader. And my respect for my leader grew just watching that conversation.
That really showcases emotional intelligence, being able to navigate that and not let the emotions get the best of you, and just be able to dissect and help pull apart the things that are important. And I'm going to imagine drowning out the noise of the things that aren't as important to help guide that conversation to where it needed to be for a good outcome.
Yeah. And like, as I recap that conversation with him afterwards and trying to take away my learnings out of it and discuss those things. He was like, don't think for a minute that I wasn't anxious in that conversation. Don't think for a minute that I didn't have my own concerns and fears about how this conversation was going, but he never showed it. Like, I never saw it. And I was just really taken back by the ability to implement that emotional intelligence at the time, and watching him navigate that conversation. It blew me away.
Well, I think that really pulls us into one of our most recent conversations about everything in season 1 is motivation. Why people do what they do each and every day, whether it be coming to work to be the superstar on the line, or coming to work to be that customer service superstar, or they have fiscal needs, whatever it is. They have some kind of passion that draws them here each and every day. And how do we constantly pull that out to make sure it is still prevalent without them losing it, or feeling like they're being defeated, or they're not heard, or they don't matter? How do we constantly build that for these team members?
I mean, the building blocks is having a good relationship, and having them, creating a safe place for them to be able to come and say, I need 5 minutes. I'm going to say some things that maybe aren't necessarily appropriate. And this is something that we talked about in great deal. And once we've set that stage, they can say just about whatever they want to me. And it's okay, because I know the context of why they're saying what they're saying. And that's so vitally important to having a good, strong team that knows that they can come to you at those vulnerable times and say what they need to say, so that we can move on and get the job done for the day. So, lots been talked about for season 1, and like we've said in closing remarks for each episode, every day is going to be tough. I know the last couple of weeks for me have been in extremely intense, with that emotional drain, because you put in so much of yourself, of trying to lead a team. But seeing those rewards, seeing those learnings, and coming away from your tough week and being able to recap with yourself and go over the things that you've learned is so impactful to you as a leader, because you know that you're doing some things right, and it's validating, right? Because you're going to make mistakes every single day. It doesn't matter what day it is, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to say something that somebody's going to take the wrong way. You might offend somebody that you didn't intend to offend. But what matters is that you come back to that conversation. Maybe you give a day to digest and let some tensions fall. But then the important thing is that you come back to that conversation and say, all right, let's go over this again. Let's talk about this, because we can't let it be a situation that just lingers. And that's part of accountability, right? Holding myself accountable and holding that person accountable. And it doesn't always mean discipline, but it does mean we're still going to talk about this, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure it out together. And at the end of the day, that will build a stronger team, but that one day is going to feel impossible.
Well, and we spend so much time in world number 1 in the real world that you want this space to feel like you belong. Your team spends their entire day here, so you have to spend that day with them as well. You want it to feel less negative. You want it to feel more inviting. You want it to be the perfect place for your team to thrive. And if all of the pieces are working in conjunction with each other, you're going to get that. But the moment everything starts to fall apart and everything has a lot of hurdles and obstacles and issues, the tension gets built, the animosity gets built, and then it feels harder and harder to contain everything that's there, and then the disconnects start to happen, and then everything just starts to fall apart.
And it ties back into that motivation piece, right? motivation doesn't mean you're doing celebrations for your team all the time, or it doesn't mean that you're having that type of engagement. But the fact that you took the time to recap with somebody and try and make it, get on the same page and make a situation better, shows that you care, and that builds that. What's that word I'm looking for? It puts that leadership capital back in the bank that you may have spent, inadvertently ruining somebody's day.
Mm-hmm. That credit that you now need to build back up to use again.
Yep.
You okay over there, Jed?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking as you were talking about motivation, my mind wandered a little bit, and I was thinking about a guest speaker that I had heard on another podcast talking about how they don't believe in motivation. They don't believe that is real, and I had a really hard time wrapping my head around it. And what they ultimately were getting at is that motivation, we think of motivation as being this driving force that's, going to show up one day, and you're going to wake up every day and just have this feeling that you're ready to go out there and do it, and that you're going to want it, and you're going to have all the drive to get it done. And that's just not our reality, right? I mean, how many times do we wake up as leaders and we don't feel like going in and tackling the day? I don't want to be the one today that people are looking to for help and answers, because I don't feel like I'm in a condition to do that, or I don't feel like I want to, work with other people's problems right now, or whatever the case may be. Right? It's just I don't feel like I have it in me today. And her point was that motivation comes from discipline, not the other way around.
Correct.
Right? That we have this idea that if we just wake up one day and we're motivated, we'll get everything lined up and it'll be easy after that. But that's not how it works. Motivation comes from doing it consistently, even when you don't want to, from building up that momentum the hard way. And, as leaders, we're people too. You mentioned it earlier too, Nick, right? We're going to make mistakes every day. We're people just like everyone else. And when you have those conversations you don't want to have, right? I have egg on my face. I don't want to circle back to Billy and talk to him about what happened yesterday or whatever our interaction was. That's uncomfortable. I'm not motivated to go have that conversation right now. I'd rather avoid it. But you have to be disciplined to do what you need to do to lead your team. Then the motivation will come.
It's like the difference between joy and happiness. And just because you're not happy, it doesn't mean that you haven't built a relationship for sustainability. And just because you had a rough day or you had a bad interaction, holistically speaking, that team member's like, you know what, they screwed up. I get it. And they're still going to come and do their job because they know that at the end of the day, you give a crap. You and that you're there for them. And so you may lose a little bit of ground one day, but as long as you're consistent and you come back to it and you continue to push forward and you continue to build that relationship with that team member or that peer or your boss or whoever, you're going to continue to move the needle forward. And sometimes that's incredibly difficult to see in the moment. So
I think it goes back to we all had that question of how do you start your day? And mine is, I always start with the day by making my bed. Not everyone does that. Not everyone has that routine they have to do.
That's a great speech by that, I think is an admiral or something.
I think so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like if you can start your day by getting the first thing done, taking care of the space that you go home to, or the space that you start your day on every day.
Your first win for the day.
First win for the day. You set yourself up for success. And if that's not your first win, then you need to find your first win and get everything rolling after that. But you have to have some kind of discipline, some kind of routine to get everything going forward. And that's ultimately where that comes down to is, are you ready to set that routine to be successful?
So again, this season we covered a lot of different topics, and they all very much tie in together one way or another. And if you are that leader that's struggling, if you are that person that wants to take that next step into leadership, you have to remember that it is a journey, and one day does not define your entire life. One day does not define your entire career, your entire journey. And it is a combination of trials and tribulations that you have to push through. And if you have that discipline, you have that drive, and you have that want to continue to improve yourself and those around you, then you're on the right track.
Well, anyone can earn the title of manager, coach, supervisor, whatever it is, by getting that promotion. But to continue to be the leader takes a lot of extra effort and a lot of learning, and continuously putting forth the effort, like you had said, Jed, leaders are readers, building skills, adding more, and never stopping learning. You're going to continue to develop those skills. And when you stop, well, you're no longer developing and you're just kind of stagnant. And that's where you lose that ability to stay motivated.
So, Robbie, I want to ask you, looking back on season 1, what is the most impactful topic to you that's helped you along in your journey?
For me, emotional intelligence. There's a lot that comes from just hopping in, analyzing certain situations, and then I can turn off the emotions. I need to stop doing that. It's understanding how to stay connected and how to build more on it, and then continue to grow and push forward, rather than just dissecting and moving on. But how can I understand people better?
Those are good things. Jed, I'm going to ask you the same question. What's the most impactful thing that we've covered in season 1 for you?
I think I'm aligned with Robbie. I think for me, it's emotional intelligence. It's understanding that just pushing forward with, I guess, whatever you had in mind isn't always the right thing. We're working with people. We're all different. We all have different viewpoints and different ideas, and that we should, we need to embrace that, especially as leaders, because their ideas are better than mine, right? I might be pretty smart, but I'll bet there's someone smarter in the room, and if there isn't, I'm in the wrong room. And if I'm not paying attention and listening and hearing what they have to say because I'm too caught up in my own stuff, I'm never gonna benefit from that.
Yeah.
And then I can't help other people.
Yeah. I think for me, the most impactful thing is building those relationships with your team, and also at the same time being consistent, and not, if I'm going to hold somebody accountable for a specific thing, then I better be prepared to hold everybody to that same standard. And I can't differentiate between people because I know about this person's kids, and I've built a different relationship with this person than I have this person, and so I have a little bit more empathy. You have to be consistent, and that's something that has been a hard lesson to learn for me. And it's just one of those things that I don't want to ever lose sight of, because you may have a top performer on your team that you don't have to worry about, and that's going to produce every single day. But at the end of the day, you can't let them slide on policy, on safety, on the core foundation of what we do, because you've got a good relationship with that person. And that's been a hard one for me to navigate. So it's been very impactful to have an understanding of consistency.
For me, when I think of consistency, I think of a rule as a rule because someone did something that caused the policy to be put in place. And now once you've said this is now the thing that has to happen, you lose all credit when you no longer hold people to that same standard. So the next thing you try to hold people to is going to lose that power because you've already him-hawed. You've already gone back and forth. So is this really going to be something we stick with, or is this going to be something you're just there for a moment?
I can think of a couple of different scenarios in my head that I've made that same mistake.
I've made that same mistake too. I've done that a lot of times, and it's not something that I want to be. I want to be repeating. I want to be able to say, "This is it. This is the line we do not cross, and we're not going to go back."
And to take that one step further, to be humble enough to admit that I made this mistake, and here's what I'm going to do to fix it, and here's what I'm going to do to rectify that, because it's very easy to make that mistake and then put your head in the sand and not worry and hope that it goes away. But you have to be consistent, and if you're not, you're going to lose all credibility with your team.
And credibility and not having it is where you're no longer successful.
So,
all right, guys. Thank you for tuning in for our season 1, our journal number 1 here on the Leadership Journal podcast. We look forward to having you back for our next season. We cover a lot more topics. We've got some fun things planned. We're going to break those down when we introduce season 2.
And it's going to be a lot more deep dive.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And I really want to dig into more of the 3 worlds in the coming season and some more expansion and some other stuff as we dig in. But definitely enjoyed.
I would definitely like to hear a little bit more perspective from Jed on the 3 worlds and discuss that a little bit further and get his take on it.
Careful what you ask for. I'm a talker.
And that's all right, because we're here to talk.
Love it.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in here on the Leadership Journal podcast for our recap of season 1. Look forward to hearing from us as we get started on season 2 here in a couple weeks, and catch you on the next one.
Thank you.